All right, I think we're ready to get started. Thank you all for joining today. We're pretty excited. We're on our number 6 virtual team webinar. This is our 6th, and we've now that all of you that have been with us from the very beginning, we're pretty excited to present this particular topic, the phases of team development. I personally have a lot of experience with this particular sort of presentation, and in my career I've used it quite a bit, and so Nikki and I both have lots of experience working with different teams that have been at all stages of this Tuckman model that we'll walk through. But the title is Phases of Team Development, Behavioral Insights to Know, Engage, and Grow Your Teams Remotely. Obviously with COVID-19, we're all working diligently to figure out the best way to work, and that's why we started this 8-week series. So we're pretty excited about it. My name is Leon Morales, and I am the Managing Director here at DNA Behavior. And my work really is around developing the relationships, not only with our business DNA program that we're featuring today, but also the financial DNA program, which is part of our tool set. So we're pretty excited, and I'll introduce Nikki Evans, and she can give you a little bit of her background.
Thanks, Leon. Hi, everyone. As Leon said, my name is Nikki Evans. I lead training and programs here for DNA, and am super excited to be with you and share what we know about some team development. Maybe some insights for why your team isn't exactly like it used to be when it was in the office. So we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. And so those of you on the call probably have had different sort of stages of teams. So we found this model, we've been using it for a number of years, the Tuckman model. So we're going to really walk through how this works. And I think it'll all make sense, and you can sort of determine where your team might be, or maybe a previous team. We expect the webinar to go about 45 minutes, and depending on how the Q&A will work out, and we do encourage you to use the Q&A box there to ask questions. You can also chat with us. We'll monitor that as well. It's a good way for us to interact, really understand what's important for you as we walk through this. But we've got sort of the formal process of walking through the different stages we have here, and I'll let Nikki unveil it. And also just to let you know, our next webinar, number 7, is May 6th at 3 p.m. And we'll give you an opportunity to weigh in on what we should really focus on for the number 7 webinar. With that, and you will get a copy of this recording along with the presentation later, first thing in the morning or sometime mid-morning. You'll get that. You'll also get a short survey that'll be sent out to you shortly after this webinar. We encourage you to take that because it does help us with our programming. With that, we do have our first poll question that'll get it really familiar with who we have in the audience. But have you ever worked in an organization or a project that continued to have dysfunction in it? And if you're familiar with how that works, just means that people are gossiping. They may, it's just not operating at full capacity. So if you could just take a couple seconds and answer those questions. Have you ever worked in an organization or project that continued to be dysfunctional? Yes, no, or not certain. And we'll leave it open for a couple more seconds. We've got a few people that haven't voted. All right, Nikki, I think we'll go ahead and lock it down. And the results are that everybody has some experience with team dysfunction.
Okay.
So it shows us where we are. At least it gives us a level setting. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Leon. So I'm sorry to hear that you've been in an organization or on a project that has been stuck in dysfunction, but maybe we can shed some light on what that is today. And if that's a team or a project that you're currently working on, maybe help give you some insights into what might be happening and how you might be able to influence that a little bit. So as Leon mentioned, the Tuckman model, he really defined stages that a team goes through. And these stages are, we've listed them here as a cycle, and that's true in some respects, but I probably should have the arrows going both directions, because depending on what's happening with the environment and with the team, that can certainly happen. So what he identified were forming, storming, norming, performing, and then depending on afterwards he added, so those were the main cycles that he added, and later added adjourning or mourning as a team stage to recognize when a team is breaking up, a project is over, that there is a phase for that. So we're going to start with forming, which is the first step in a team development. And what happens here, this is where teams first start to come together. So the team members don't know each other well. They tend to be on their best behavior, like you are when you're around strangers. You tend to withhold personal information about yourself. You tend to be on your best behavior and be civil and kind to one another, trying to kind of figure out what your role on this team is going to be, who is going to, who are you going to be working with, who are these other people, because everybody's being on their best behavior. So you're trying to suss out a little bit, who are these people? A lot of team members may be super enthusiastic to get started. If you think about that, your first day of school or your first day at work, like some people are super excited about that, but some people are fairly anxious about all the uncertainty. Will I make any friends? Is this project going to go anywhere? Is this the right team to be a part of? Did I make a good choice here? And so what you've got are all these people who are trying to figure out what's this going to be. So there's a little bit of a hesitation, there's a little bit of guardedness in everybody, and you've got people on varying ends of the enthusiasm scale. Some people may be very anxious about this new thing starting and these new people that they're surrounded by, and some people will be very excited and enthusiastic about that, and maybe a little more optimistic. And then teams move to a storming phase. And this storming phase is where some teams get stuck. And when Leon mentioned teams that stayed in a dysfunctional state, what he's referring to are teams that got stuck here in the storming phase. So in the storming phase, people are past their initial impressions with one another. Their natural behavior starts to get demonstrated a little bit more. So instead of being, polite company manners, people start to be more themselves, and you start to see that more. Those conflicts in working styles start to come out as each person gets a little bit more comfortable and brings more of themselves to the team. You start to see some conflicts in those styles come out. You may start to see stress behavior as people emerge with their natural behavior, and those styles are maybe in conflict with one another. That can trigger stress behavior for some people. Challenges to authority and jockeying for position. So the roles and responsibilities at forming weren't really well defined, but now in this storming phase, they're getting more defined, and people are grabbing for what is their position going to be on the team? What is their role going to be? And you may see that people are disagreeing with one another about what the roles should be or what the accountabilities should be on the team and how things are laid out. And so this becomes a really important stage of a team for a leader to help define roles, help to manage through how people can work better with one another and how you can use those natural talents in a better way. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. I just want you to get a sense of what each of these stages looks like. So again, in this storming phase, you're past your company manners, you're not all on your best behavior, you're starting to be more like your natural self or potentially more like your stressful self. And people are really trying to dig in on that roles and responsibilities piece and figure out where they fit on the team, where do they bring value, and where do they get value from other members on the team. And then as teams that get successful at moving out of that storming phase, they come into the norming phase of the team. And here's where team members start to recognize and appreciate the strengths of others on the team. More personal relationships start getting built, stronger commitment to team goals, so people understand their roles and responsibilities. They share a common goal and vision as a team. Those agreements of the team have been made clear and have been agreed to by the group. So progress toward goals starts to happen in this phase. And differences in feedback start to be handled. So that doesn't mean that differences and those conflicts that we saw in storming just disappear with a norming team. although we wish, right? They don't. What happens instead is that those differences and feedback start being handled constructively. We start telling more generous stories about each other. We have better language to know the strengths of each person on the team and to know how each person is working. So we're better able to handle those differences in a constructive way. This is where we can have creative conflict and constructive conflict with one another. And this is where teams can really start to innovate and really start to perform. And then moving out of that norming phase. So in the norming phase, we're just starting to pick up steam. We're just starting to see progress. And then teams that are consistent with producing results, that don't move back into a storming phase, but can continue to work with a minimum of friction. And that doesn't mean that there's no conflict on the team, but what it does mean is that that conflict is around ideas and not around people and personalities. And so it's a safe environment where there's high trust, where people can share their ideas, where they can disagree about the ideas or about the steps to take or about the plans, but they don't make each other wrong about it. So they can really look together at a team, at the facts and the goals, and maybe debate about what those are and what they should be and how to get to them, but they don't make each other wrong in that, so that there's no uncomfortable friction with the team. The team is reaching their goals. So it's not a false harmony with the team. The team is comfortable challenging one another, and they feel like it's a safe environment to do that. So they've built high trust. They can have honest conversations with one another, and they're getting to goals. And so again, achieving goals not through avoiding conflict, but achieving goals even through conflicting ideas and points of view. But really performing, really meeting goals, not meeting superficial goals, but meeting some of the big goals that they have. And this is where the leader can focus more on developing team members than on managing the activities of the team. So we'll talk a little bit more in a little bit about what a leader's role could be in moving the team along in this cycle. Once the team, and so the leader's main job around a forming, storming, and norming team is to help that team move up to that next phase, help them move into the next phase until they get to this performing. And once they're consistently producing results, they're a high performing team, they're a high trust team. Now the leader can think about developing those individual team members, pushing them, giving them new challenges, rather than the day-to-day of the team and the individual and short-term goals of the team. The leader can get much more visionary around where does this team need to go, what's it going to look like, who on the team can maybe start taking my place as the team leader so that everybody's, rising in the organization. So I'll pause here and we'll do another poll question. And if you have any questions, I did cover those phases fairly quickly. If you have any questions about those phases, please let us know. Drop your question in the chat or in the questions box, and we will work on answering that.
All right, thank you, Nikki. And our second poll question here, and let's try to be as honest as we can. If you can identify where your team is today, and Nikki walked through the forming, storming, norming, performing. We didn't add adjourning because we assume you're still functioning as a team, but where you are on that continuum, because it's going to be helpful for us to be able to see that. So that'll show up on the screen here. And here we go. All right, can you identify where your team is today? The forming stage, which is beginning, storming, where there's actually conflict and people aren't necessarily understanding the behavioral strengths. Norming is a good place. It's where teams are sort of functioning, but maybe not at the optimal level. And then performing is where you truly get that high performing team. People are really achieving their goals, milestones. So it's a great place to be. So we've got almost about 80% of the voting in. So we'll go ahead and close this out and share the results. And Nikki, it looks like we have most of the majority of the team at norming stage, and then 20% at the performing stage. Norming at
Awesome.
80, that's pretty good. No storming, that's really good. All
Yeah,
right,
that's
turn that
great.
back to you.
Okay. So I'm going to now talk and shift to how do you lead through these stages? So as a leader or as a team member. So I strongly believe that we are all leaders no matter what our position is. And if you can recognize, even from a contributor perspective on a team, what has to happen, you can do a couple of things. Either you can lead with authority as the leader of the team, or lead through influence and questions to help the rest of the team come along as well. So as you're in the forming stage, it's really important to set very clear goals and a vision for the team as a whole. So as if you're not the leader with authority, are you asking the questions? What's the goal? What is our vision? Does everybody understand it? And then communicate those goals and a vision for each team member. Communicating is one of those things that we think we can do we can say it one time and we've communicated, and it is not true. People, especially in this forming stage where everything is uncertain and nobody's really clear on roles and responsibilities, that communication is so important. So you're going to have to communicate more often and in more ways than you think is necessary. If you feel like that's all you've said all day long, you're probably saying it about the right amount of time. Check for understanding with the team as a whole and with each team member. You want your team to be able to repeat to you in their own words what the goal is and what the vision is for the group. And so if you have shared, this is what the vision is, this is what our goal is, this is what we need to do, poll your people. What do you understand and what do you think your part is in that goal, in meeting that vision? And if they can't articulate that clearly, then you need to tell them again where you see them fitting until they can repeat back to you in a way that makes it clear that they understand and that they're clear on what actions they need to take in order to meet that goal. So if I'm to give a goal to somebody, even something really task focused, hey, I need you to take this spreadsheet and move the highlighted items here onto another sheet in a different column. I want to check for understanding there. Do you understand what that is? So what actions are you going to take in order to meet that goal? Do you understand the goal is to have this done by tomorrow? Do you understand the steps that I'm asking you to take? What questions do you have? Can you tell me what your plan is to achieve that goal? That's going to really help people get and check for understanding. So I think over communicating as you're forming a team is super important for a leader. So how do you lead through this storming phase? So this is the part where it becomes much harder, both as a team member and a team leader, to feel really comfortable in this stage. This is an uncomfortable growth opportunity for a team and growth stage for a team. And this is where you're testing boundaries and you need to start building trust with one another. And when you overlook that need for building trust and building respect with one another, this is where teams get stuck in that storm. So you need to do things that work on establishing or reestablishing trust in this phase. And I mentioned earlier that a team can go from a norming team back into a storming team. What causes that? Things like suddenly everybody having to work from home. Things like suddenly all of our priorities changing on us. Things like having to downsize part of our company. Things like having to change the goals or the work structure of what our employees do. Things like having to do a mass hiring to meet needs of an essential business can flip you back even from a norming team or a performing team into a forming team as you get a bunch of temporary labor in. Or you can move back to a forming team because now you are you've got new people on, or you've lost some people as part of your team, as part of a downsize that's happened. And that can send you back to that forming where, again, vision and communication are your keys as a leader or a team member. If you're a team member in a forming stage, then you want to make sure that you've asked for clarity until you're clear. To lead through this storming phase, again, it's going to be about establishing trust or reestablishing trust. Think about what are behaviors that indicate trust with people and declare those behaviors. What will trust look like on our team? And think about, part of that is follow through on commitment, matching your words with your actions, doing what you say you're going to do, holding each other accountable for commitments. Those are things that build trust. Sharing common experience, resolving conflict. So as a leader of a team, when these conflicts and these struggles for who's going to do what on the team and what are the roles and responsibilities going to be come up, it is the leader's role to help resolve those conflicts, either through clarity of communication on what needs to be done, or by facilitating a healthy debate where you allow debate about ideas, but not debate about people and people qualities. So again, it's okay to disagree with one another, but you need to work on resolving issues, not each other. So knowing and creating a common language around strengths and struggles is a great way to do that. So at DNA Behavior, we love our discovery tool as a method for doing this. But however you do it, understand and have some language around this. We as human beings, particularly under stress, are wired to tell ourselves a story about any situation so that we can understand, is the situation a threat or is it safe? How should I behave in this situation? And because our reptilian brains are wired to look for danger, our story-making machine is also wired to tell fairly negative stories. Those are the ones that keep us safe. If we err on the side of a negative story and we're wrong, and there was no lion, we don't get eaten by a lion. If we err on the side of that's probably not a lion and we were wrong, we get eaten by a lion. So what happens is we start to tell these stories about, well, why did Leon do this in this meeting? Why did he say that? It must be because he doesn't appreciate my ideas. It must be because he doesn't appreciate my contribution. And so not having anything else, and if I'm not willing to say to Leon, why are you saying that? It makes me feel like you disrespect my idea. He won't know that something that he said has made me have a negative story, but suddenly my behavior and attitude toward him is going to change. And when that happens, his behavior and attitude toward me is going to start to change. And without even understanding why we're in conflict with one another, no one will remember that it was that one meeting 2 years ago when I didn't feel respected by something that he said. I'll just know that I don't feel respected by Leon, and he will know that I appear in a way that's leery of him, and so maybe he doesn't respect me as much. And it becomes this self-fulfilling loop. When you can know and create common language that addresses strengths and struggles, that addresses these communication things, then I can know, for instance, when Leon said this thing, that he is fast-paced, he thinks out loud, he probably didn't think through how direct that might have sounded to me. And I can say to him, hey, that sounded really direct. Did you mean that my idea wasn't good, or did you just have another one on top of it really fast? Because it felt to me like you thought my idea was no good, right? 9 times out of 10, he's going to look at me with this look of shock on his face and say, I didn't even hear your idea. I was so excited about mine. Or, oh my gosh, no, that's not what I meant. I thought my idea was adding on to your idea. I thought your idea was great. And so I was just adding this extra piece on top of it, right? But without high trust on a team, those kinds of conversations aren't likely to happen. When you can know how people are wired, when I know for sure that Leon is wired to be fast-paced and a high-risk taker and to move quickly and to come across with authority and to make decisions, then I know that he's behaving in a way that's natural to him. And if that behavior feels unnatural to me or feels harsh to me, then I can tell the story. He doesn't intend it that way. That's just how he's wired. And so then I can ask for what I need. I don't have to just agree to feel crappy about it. I can ask for what I need. Hey, that didn't feel really great. Can we talk a little bit more about that? And because we have this common language, we understand that about each other. The other thing is, as a leader, you can, or as a team member, explain these stages to your team. Explain that this is a normal process of moving from a team that's forming into a team that's going to be performing. But this is one of those necessary, like, growing pains to get you there. This is the terrible twos of building a team. And so if you can call it out, and now again, this is creating some common language for what's happening with you. It invites you to create more clarity around your roles. It invites you to create more clarity around what's happening with you. And so, again, either as a team member or as the team leader, helping to call out these behaviors, helping to put together some agreements around what constitutes trust for our team. What are those behaviors that we want to continue to see? That are the behaviors that will indicate that we have the culture that we want. So in the forming stage, as you set your vision as a team, I encourage you to set the behaviors that you would like to see that encourage the team, so that when you're in the storming phase, you can help be accountable for those behaviors that you want to see to move you past the storm and into the norming and performing phases. So as a leader, to get now past that storming phase, we've built some trust with the team. We've made sure that we're appreciating each other's strengths, that we're setting people up to succeed based on their natural talents. We have some language to talk about that. We have some shared experience that we got through the storming phase together. So a good thing to do here as you get to the norming stage is consider doing a team building event. Consider thinking about appreciating this team that you've built that has gotten itself past that storming stage. Or maybe this can help pull you across the line out of the storming stage and into the norming stage, where you again share a common experience and you have something that allows you to build on from there. Notice that the team starts to resolve conflict. And so this is what I like to call catch people doing things right. Again, because of our brains being wired to look for danger, it's much more natural for most of us to see what people around us are doing wrong. It's just the way our brains are wired, and particularly under stress, it's much easier to see, how can my husband not move a dish from the sink into the dishwasher? They're literally right next to each other. Why is he putting the sink, why is he putting the dish in the sink? Like it doesn't need to be in the sink. It needs to be in the dishwasher. Much easier to catch him doing something that I consider wrong than the fact that he cooked the whole dinner and I didn't have to lift a finger. Then he, mowed the lawn and he's made sure that we have food on the table. So I call this catch people doing something right. Call out those things. When you start to see results being produced, celebrate them. When you see the team members are willing to disagree with each other in a respectful way and come to a positive conclusion, or to even at, we agree to disagree about this thing and we agree on a path forward and we're all going to do the new path forward. There's not going to be passive aggressive resistance to it. Share that with the team, encourage that, praise that. Like the things that you recognize are going to be the things that your team tends to do more of. Celebrate those successes. And as you get into this norming stage where the team is now starting to perform and you want them to move into that performing phase where they're consistently achieving results, can you make your team members take responsibility for that success? And this isn't about telling them necessarily do this thing and then this thing and then this thing. This is, hey, I need the yard to be clean. I need the grass to grow and the yard to be clean. That is the goal. I don't care how you get to the goal, but I need you to be responsible for making the yard healthy. So, in my mind, healthy yard means that the trash is picked up, that the leaves are raked, that the grass is green, that it's trimmed. But however you get to that, that's up to you as a team, and I need you to own accountability for making the yard right, or making this project work. as a leader, I'm here to help you and support you if things go wrong or if you get stuck someplace, but I want you as a team to start taking responsibility for these outcomes. And as you do that, the team starts to feel more authority. They start to feel more responsibility and accountability for getting you to your goals. And that allows them to start moving into that space where, because they own the accountability for this, because it's theirs, they can now start to perform on a more consistent basis. Nobody's looking to you as the leader for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing to do. The team feels ownership and they're able to start moving themselves into that performing phase. So here in the performing phase, as a leader, you're doing as much delegation as possible. Here is where you're celebrating success even more. Here is where you're recognizing the achievements of your team. Here's where you're allowing the team to own their own results and step into that performance. Maybe start crafting the vision, have them contribute to what's going to happen. And here is also where you have to start watching for any kind of change that could cause you to move back to more of a norming phase or more of a storming phase. So like I said, things like happened to many people recently: downsizing, sudden work from home, change in focus and change in direction of the organization. A lot of 2020 plans have been put on hold or had to pivot significantly, given just the logistics of the world right now. And so did that move your team from a high functioning, performing, delivering results team that owned their own results, where you as a leader could be fairly hands off, back into a storming team where no one's really sure now what their roles and responsibilities are? The vision is now less clear about what they need to be doing. You know, as you think about, you know, if my job as a call center rep was to handle retention calls and nobody is calling anymore, maybe I need to pivot and do something else. Maybe there's some other place in the business that's, you know, maybe the new installs are increasing because I work at a cable company and everybody needs their internet connection now. So no one's calling to cancel right now. Everyone is calling to connect, or there's more technical support calls to make sure that everything is working. So if my team is a retention team, what do I need to do to pivot them? And how do I get them retrained? And how do I get them owning and moving quickly into that norming and performing phase, right? But I have to recognize there's some storming that's going to happen, or maybe some reforming that's going to happen, which is going to require us to agree on a vision again, which is going to require us to over communicate what that vision and what those roles and responsibilities are again, which is going to require some angst and some conflict around trying to figure that out and trying to get through that struggle. Everybody's going to handle this stress a little bit differently. And so working from home may be wonderful for some people and may be devastating for other people. And so as a leader, you may have to spend more time with certain members of your team than with others who are really struggling with this new environment that they find themselves in. Help support them, help figure out, based on what we know about each other as team members, how do we lean in and help one another to get back into that norming or back into that performing phase when something like a COVID-19 has hit us and everything seems to have fallen apart. I think this is something that, you know, a lot of leaders could maybe use to sort of frame what's happening with their team. They had this team that was awesome and that was performing, that everything was going well, and now suddenly everything feels like chaos. Productivity is slowed way down. Everybody is really confused. Work isn't happening the way it used to. Deliverables aren't happening the way they used to. That's the time to pull the team back together, acknowledge that this is different, acknowledge that these times are hard, and then communicate what you know. I think another thing that's hard for leaders is that there's a lot of uncertainty even for leadership. If you can communicate what you know and keep communicating what you know, your team is going to feel much better that we're all trying to work through this. We don't really have a plan yet. We don't know when we're going to go back to the office. We don't know when things are going to get better. But here's what we're doing in the meantime, and here's what we're doing to figure that out. Here's the places that we're monitoring. Here's where we're going to look for cues about how we're going to get back to work. But until then, here's what I need you to do, and here's what your goal is. And if you need to break those goals down into smaller chunks, maybe you had a team that had quarterly goals, and maybe they need to have weekly goals and monthly goals and quarterly goals to help them really stay focused and stay on track with what's the most important thing to do now. As a team member, I would say just ask questions where you're not clear. Help your leader understand where there's confusion on your team, where there's struggle, where more communication is necessary. And then moving into that adjourning cycle, here's where you can celebrate and cycle, and the cycle will start over again. So when the team's work is fully complete, can you celebrate that success and honor the work of the team, and honor the loss of the team as a unit? If everybody's moving on to something else, if this was a temporary project team, if this was a fundraising goal and we've met the goal and now this team is going to disband, can you celebrate the success of that team? Recognize that people are going to miss one another. Make some sort of ceremony out of it so that it's honoring the work that's been done. It was a team that I know of that got a new leader, and I think they were really missing this adjourning as they knew themselves, as they moved kind of into a forming storming phase, and they ended up getting stuck. But I think part of it is that they didn't have this celebration or some sort of ceremony around the ending of what was the team, and sort of then a transition and a rebirth into what the team was going to be in the future. So it wasn't that all the members of the team were disbanding and leaving each other. It was that as a new leader was coming on, and as they were going to get more direction, the work that they had done kind of on their own needed to end and adjourn, and that phase got skipped. And I think it made it much harder for them to move through that cycle again, and form into a new team, which is also an important point about a forming team, right? You could have a team that's in that norming phase and get a new employee, and that sends you back to the forming phase for a little while. It doesn't have to be really long, but that new person is brand new to the team and is either anxious or excited, and they need to figure out their role on the team, and everybody else on the team needs to figure out how is that going to adjust. Are they going to take over a role that somebody else was doing already, or is it a brand new role? How is that going to change, and how is that person's personality going to work with the rest of the culture of the team? So everybody goes back to forming a little bit and kind of checking each other out and figuring out how this new person is going to fit in. There may be a little bit of storming as that new person tries to figure out the norms and the culture of the team. Those phases don't have to last for a really long time for a high-performing team, but it is important to recognize and honor that as a new person comes in or as a new leader comes in, you really do have to cycle back through those phases a little bit to get to know each other a little bit, to get through that storming phase where everybody's trying to figure each other out, and then figure out, well, how does this change my role and responsibility? How does this change my goal? How does this change my standing and position with the team? And then moving back into that norming and performing phase. So that gets you through then to completing the work as a group and to the adjourning. So that's where I'm going to leave you today, but think about where you really are now as a team, and those teams that are in the norming and forming phase now, did you have to go back through a little bit more of forming and storming when the order came in that we needed to shelter in place? Did you have to step back a little bit? Were you conscious of it? Were you a high enough performing team that you just did it a little bit naturally and it was a quick phase? Or are you maybe, have you maybe regressed, and may you have to spend a little bit more focus and attention back in one of those earlier phases and do some of those leadership steps to get yourself back up to a more norming and performing team? So I appreciate your time today, and Leon, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate it, and great job describing the phases of these teams. And as you pointed out or illustrated, you can quickly go from a performing to a storming just by having one new person come to the team, or if somebody leaves the team. So it really does show leadership takes sort of a continuous work to make sure that the team is performing. It's been a great way to sort of dissect a team and really show where people are. We do have one more poll question that we want to show up on it's number 3. This just helps us organize our content. So if you could just think about what would you like to see for this 7th and the 8th webinar. We've got good idea based on the last few survey results, but it does help us put that together. Our options here for poll question 3 is more case studies on virtual team effectiveness, more case studies on individual comparisons, because we did that a couple of weeks ago, more case studies on leader and team member effectiveness, or actually how to use the tools. And it shows up there on the screen if you don't mind taking just a second or two and just answering the poll question. Okay, we've got about 50% in. I'll give it a couple more seconds here. You can just finalize that. I'm getting some more votes in here. Okay, I will go ahead and present this. It's actually, it's split here. So Nikki, we have more case studies on virtual team effectiveness, about 25%, 50% on leader and team member effectiveness, and then 25% on team tool training. So
Okay.
we can probably incorporate those for the last two. And we do appreciate everybody participating in the poll, and glad that you were able to join us today. And then finally, just always like to let everyone know it's on the call about the Leadership Behavior DNA book that was actually launched in January. So Hugh Massey, our CEO, and his mentor, Lee Ellis, who's one of our partners here at DNA Behavior, they co-wrote the book, Leadership Behavior DNA. It really walks through all of the concept Nikki's been focused on natural and instinctive behavior. And in this phase of a team, you know, when you're forming, you're storming, you're norming, performing, these are all illustrated case studies that help you sort of understand how to get your team to perform. Can be a lot of fun to go through these stages and identify where you are. The book is a great enabler, and we encourage you to grab that on Amazon. And then our the last page is around our next webinar, which will be number 7 of 8. It'll be next Wednesday at 3 p.m., May 6th. We hope you'll register. You'll get the invitation. And all of our webinars from 1 through 6 are on YouTube. They're there. If you want to, they have a playlist. So if you missed any, or you want to refer back to any of those, they are on our DNA Behavior YouTube channel.
Thanks, Leon. I also wanted to mention that around the tool training, I would say the one that we did last week had a little bit more on the factors and some of the training around the science, which may be helpful for the folks that want to learn a little bit more about training. And then we'll talk more about specifically our tools and the reports a little bit later.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. And with that, if anybody has any questions for us, you're certainly welcome to reach out at inquiries@dnabehavior.com. That gets managed around the clock, so it comes to one of us, whether it's Nikki or me. You can find us on LinkedIn as well, and we look forward to you on the next webinar. Thank you, Nikki, for your help in identifying team phases. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.